Great. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. This is the February 11th meeting of the Housing Commission. We are in the Kearsarge Professional Development Center on a beautiful winter day. As I said earlier, it's one of the best of February that we're seeing right now. Lots of snow, clear blue sky, very exciting for those who love winter. First on the agenda is governance, as we usually do. We have a quorum. Amy is here as an alternate, so Amy, if you would serve as a full member, voting member, if you would, please.
Absolutely.
We will be all set. I think we're going to have to postpone the elections for officers, which we said we would do every year. In fact, we're
Postponed until next year.
till next year. Well, actually, I had been doing some discussion with folks, and if he is so nominated, and I would like to nominate him, he would like to serve as vice chair. So when we have the election, I will be nominating the responsibility for vice chair, and you can vote.
Who?
Neil Bergquist.
Oh.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So why don't we wait till Neil's here so he can,
My mother.
you mean, if you're not here, you might be elected.
That's
I see, okay.
Yes, Dad.
When's the next meeting?
It is important also to mention, sadly, Mike Quinn will be retiring this year. His term expires. Ann Bedard has spoken to me as willing to extend. So thank you, Ann. But we will also be looking for good, thoughtful, active new commissioners. So please keep your thinking caps on for possibilities for people who have shown an interest, and you certainly may speak to them. Ultimately, the appointments are made by the select board members, so it's not in our authority to do that, but we certainly can make recommendations to the select board for that. I have a few ideas, but we need a lot more ideas. So, oh, there's Neil.
We already voted for.
No problem, Neil. Perfect timing.
You're not really. Let's vote, not to worry.
It's not too late to run out.
Not to worry. But I would like to get this matter off the agenda because we pushed it a couple of times down the road. We need to elect our commissioners for the next year, with the terms starting in March after town meeting, as select board members and all elected officials do. So I will look to the commissioners for nominations for chair and vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Peter Nichols and Neil as chair and vice chair.
I second that.
Nomination made, seconded. Any other nominations? There being none, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? None opposed and no abstentions. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
And
You're just in time.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Having spoken with you in advance, I know you would accept, so I won't give you the chance to decline.
You N-E-I or N-I-E?
Neil.
Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. I will also ask and remind us that we promised ourselves to do a review of the rules of procedure every now and then. Last rules of procedure are from June of 2022, so the timing would be right. I will ask that you please take a read through, see if anything is not relevant, needs to be repositioned, needs new additions for our conduct, not necessarily our behavior, because we're kind of a wild and crazy bunch. But the things we want to accomplish, and our mission can even go into what I think is a lot of our mission statement is in this rules of procedure. But it was written some time ago, and we may have things that we should change. So please, for our next meeting, I'll be bringing it up and we'll have a discussion about any ideas you may have for revision. So we're turning now to the audit review discussion. Like to make a brief review and report. But one of the things I wanted to start with was I took a read through the policy and regulatory audit report that was done. We all have copies of that That's in essence, Mark Fougère's audit of our regulations. And Steve Whitman and Resilience Planning and Design encapsulate a lot of that and put it into a very, very good and thorough report with many ideas of things that can be done. Not all new housing related ideas necessarily, but some of them, what I would call maintenance or cleanup of existing ordinance. So there's a lot of meat to this report. But I want to focus just for a moment on the statements and review that were done in the preamble, I will say, about the master plan. And this is the 2021 master plan, of course, in our town. And it restates some of it in a very concise fashion. I thought I would just touch on a couple of those to remind us what we're doing here, that we are a board, a commission that was created under statute rules by the select board and all land use planning boards use the master plan as their guide. And in fact, the select board members do as well. So here are a couple restatements of things in the master plan that I thought were relevant to consider just quickly. In the vision statement, this clearly emphasized the desire to protect and preserve that distinct character of New London as the community blends new residential and commercial development into landscape. The vision statement actions call for 1, small residential lots clustered around the core commercial, community service, and institutional areas. 2, small scale development, including a mix of uses consistent with traditional New England architecture. Interesting, this is a reflection of the look of a building, so New England architecture. 3, encourage housing that accommodates a variety of age and income levels crucial to the vitality of any community. Form-based code is in the master plan, which I had forgotten. It says the master plan advocates for the creation of a comprehensive form-based code in the commercial and institutional zones. Says a lot of other things, but I'm just hitting the high points here. Affordable housing. The master plan recommends that the town explore ways to increase the availability of workforce housing in a number of ways. Investigate regulatory changes subject to availability of town facilities and consistent with town development, designed to encourage market rate development of housing that is affordable to a variety of income levels. It also recommends detached accessory dwelling units specifically.
Interrupt,
Yes, please.
I think.
And could you use your microphone?
No. I just want to say under the workforce housing.
Yeah.
I think they should put the statute in. It's an RSA. It's in under workforce housing, first bullet.
Yep. Yep, I jumped over in workforce housing a bit.
I know you did, but
The-
I'm going back to something I think the
Good.
RSA should be noted in that. So people, if they want to look at it, can look at the RSA.
Good point.
I actually looked it up.
There is, yes. Under workforce housing, it says the master plan also explains the creation of the workforce housing overlay district and included the following recommendations. We know about some of them, but the one that struck me was explore best practices and new approaches to encourage the development of workforce housing. So, and as Ann pointed out, we should get the RSA statement. Back to detached accessory dwelling units. We all know how that was put forth in March of 2024, but interestingly enough, the master plan puts forth detached accessory dwelling units with limitations, size, locations, minimum lot sizes, setbacks, etc. So I thought that was really helpful to read. I have not reread the whole master plan, but those excerpts are pretty important. Are we live now? Or let's
I realized a cord was hanging over the front that I
Oh.
didn't see, so.
So we're still good? Okay. Great. Then I think we should report on the work session that was held January 29th. At our last meeting, I reported that there would be a work session with Adam, myself, Steve Whitman, Zach Rohinsky, Liz Kelly from Resilience Planning and Design to go over the list of options to consider in the regulatory report. The regulatory audit. In preparation for that meeting, Steve Whitman and his team reconfigured a lot of the options into a simpler list, but also categorized list. And this is what we used as our work material. I'll pass these around. This is double-sided, something on the front and back for this. We're not going to go through all these because they were in the other material that was sent to you previously in the audit report. But you can see it's now been reorganized in a way under different concepts of zoning potential and land use possibilities. So this is not new information, it's just reconfigured. We had a 3-hour work session. We used the this analysis sheet that I just handed out to you as our guide. And it will be the content of the discussion was also led by Zach Rohinsky, who was actively using that GIS mapping software that had been developed over the past year that includes tax assessment data along with the mapping software. So he was able live during this meeting to look at different possibilities and facts related to land use in the town, sort of a reality check for how some of these ideas might work. All of our discussion was leading to Resilience Planning and Design producing materials for the April 4th public forum, and primarily focusing on individual profile sheets on different housing types. So there'll be discussion about what would fit in a certain zone, what might not fit, what the reality of doing it might be, and what it could look like from a housing type standpoint. There was a discussion about the water precinct and how we should deal as effectively a planning commission, how we should deal with the existence of water. And I think this commission in previous meetings has discussed this specifically. I would summarize it, I think, as saying that good long-term planning on housing must proceed and that as a long-term concept and looking forward with hopes that the water issue will be resolved. It's not within our jurisdiction, it's not within our power. Each one of us individually may feel strongly that it should be resolved and how that should be done, but it can't impact what we do because what we need to do is to look outside of the water supply and understand that in good time, hopefully things will be resolved. Now, that being said, one of the discussions that was had during this work session was that the existence of water in a district, a portion district or a region could affect development activity. Obviously, you can have more density, for example, where there is a public water supply, not only from a convenience standpoint, but also from the standpoint of not having to drill a private well on a lot that may not have an area where it could be placed. So there is some overlap of public water supply and zoning, and we'll see that as Resilience Planning Design comes back to us with the next step of this list of ideas, some of which includes treating a zone that has water supply differently than those parcels in the same zone that do not. So it would be a subset of a zone, if you will. And we'll decide if we think that's a good idea.
Sorry, I have another question.
Yes, please.
So in the town of New London, there is a development that has gone forward with, Adam, you'd have to tell me how many houses, that has a community sewer system. It's the Snow development. How many houses are up in?
West Side Drive.
West Side Drive, I don't know off the top of my head, and
8 to 10.
And I would say even maybe a few more than that.
Guessing at
And
15.
the discussion had been to some extent whether or not they put in individual wells or they were the community water supply. And I don't know of anybody except the country club that has a community water system. That's a development, but that's definitely a group.
Yeah, Slogan.
Slogan Shore. I mean, those things are possible to do within community settings with lot sizes. And I think going into the meeting for the presentation in April, we should have a couple of those examples available to people who are presenting in case that question comes up. Because we already have some long-term. Slogan Shore's water thing is old. I mean, it's had to be refurbished.
Well, and I know firsthand, of course, living there and having been president at one point. The state from time to time, they're always monitoring what we do, have reports and tests and everything, or have to comply with. But every now and then, when the rules change, they come back to us and demand certain things. For example, we have always had one well, which has been beautifully productive and clean and with a trace of uranium at one point, we had to put filtration in, which is working fine as well. Uranium and water in lots of places. But also the state came along and said, well, we know you've got enough water, but just as a backup, we insist that you drill another well. So we had to, it was quite a bit of money, so we had to, actually took a loan out to do that, so. The state is very clear and they're watching carefully.
But my point is, for people who think we can't go forward with development, we can. There can
Yes.
be community systems, both water and sewer.
Yes,
And we have them in town, they are successful. Amen.
good point, good point.
There's 15.
You'll not use the assessing software. This is good.
Great, good point. Anybody else? Nope, that's all right. Eat brain, I have to retool sometimes. So I wanted to stress that Zach Rohinski's zoning tool has been very helpful, and we will see that being used going forward. Which makes me very happy because we spent a good year working on that, and it will continue to pay off. For example, in the meeting, there were several facts that came up that were very interesting. One of them was in the R1 district, 8% of the parcels are non-conforming. That's not a big number. That's
Not in the R1.
no. In the R2, 64% are non-conforming. That's huge. That's huge. That makes me want to go back and look at the history of it, but
Okay, so saying how many units are there in R2? What is the percentage
percentage of developed lots, you mean?
of the developed lots that exist in R2? And you're saying 64 of them are
The parcels are non-conforming.
right. I would say the majority of them are non-conforming.
64%.
Isn't
Okay,
that the
sorry.
majority?
And the question I think that Marilyn was going to ask, the reason I think that is likely that way is because the R1 density was changed 5 years ago now. When we went from the 20,000 that it had been changed to back to the 10,000 that it was for many years. And so I think that demonstrates that what's on the books now for zoning is closer to what the actual development style historically was. Whereas R2, that was 20 years or so ago when they changed. I think they went from 1 acre to 2 acre in the early 2000s, late 90s maybe. It was when ARR changed from 2 acres to 4 acres. I think it all happened in the same.
Same meters.
That would make sense. And thank you for studying that history, because again, these are just things that came out of our study as we were working through the different elements. In the ARR zone, non-conformance is 66%. So R2 is 64 and ARR is 66%.
Well, that's non-conforming to the 4 acre.
Yes,
That's what you're
currently
Well,
non-conforming.
that makes total sense because
Yep. In the R2 zone, lakefront nonconformance is 66%. How about that?
They weren't supposed to be big houses, they were fishing cabins.
And they've been there longer than zoning, for God's sakes.
That's true.
That's a good point.
That doesn't, any of that, so far, none of it has really sort of surprised me much.
Houses around.
No, but they're important facts for us to think about what we can do, what we can't do and what we can do. I mean, if a zone has some substantial nonconformance, maybe it's time to consider an adjustment to that for purposes of adding some units somewhere in some way.
The non-conformance was there before the zoning, most likely in a lot of the instances. Yeah.
Right, so I
So-
think that the key there then is that when we get into the conversation of protecting the community character and those things, the built environment we know may not actually, that we actually like, may not actually be reflective of what our ordinances are. And so I think what Peter's saying is that, you know, that to adjust the sort of the perspective of what exists today maybe can't be replicated, but maybe we need to think about how our ordinances could support that kind of development that we actually already know and love. And sort of, you know, maybe it's not exactly, you know, what it was 20 years ago. Maybe there's other things that need to be thought about through the process, but I think that's the context, you know, through the master plan principles that were initially discussed, that to maintain those principles and the vision, actually, what we have on the books today doesn't do that. It doesn't support that same development pattern that we apparently all enjoy.
So I didn't want to get stuck on this, but just want to let you know the work session was very productive. And one of the things that also came out, since we're just tagging on this lakefront discussion, was the notion of strengthening the lakefront protections, if you will, or zoning allowances or prohibitions by actually making it a zone and not an overlay, making it its own zone, which means you can do more adjustment of it in ways that are prudent. So that's the report on the work session. RPD has lots of work to do to take the discussion and the facts and use the zoning tool to take it to the next step. So I would ask you at this point, what do you think, what do each of you think about the regulatory audit? I know Ann just offered an idea, which is very helpful. Any other suggestions or impressions that you have as you went through the audit report?
I think, I've said this probably in this meeting before, are these gonna be the discussion points for the meeting on in April? Jeez, it's just in April. All of these points?
No, no, we had a lot of discussions about each one of them.
Okay,
The depth of which was contributed to at least by me, a lot by Adam, and a lot by probing with Zach and Steve on what it meant, where it came from. So no, absolutely not. The menu, so to speak, will not have so many things on it because the concept have been pre-tested and modified, deleted. So we'll see a very different form of this. And also we'll see it anchored to housing types, which is something, remember, reminding myself that the next public forum is really the visioning stage. It's when we say to ourselves, okay, we have recognized some facts that lead us to understand the need for housing. Now let's think about what it might look like and what types could fit in the town and preserve town characters. I read in the master plan. That's sort of the mantra.
so that's really the thrust of the April meeting, is really discussing what housing would look like in New London.
Correct.
Not
And
the zoning stuff and not all of the what are we gonna do if we don't have water, yada, yada, yada.
Well, we're gonna see through the water issue, as I stated earlier. I think that's been our discussion. And there will be references to ideas of zoning alternatives based on the list that I handed out and that we've seen before. So it will be tied in some respects to zoning, but it will also be a lot of vision. For example, in that list, should the R1 zone be expanded? The R1, I don't know if it's a formal term, but it's always described to me as R1 as being a halo around the commercial core. And then it makes sense from one perspective to push that boundary out a little bit into the R2. And so that carries with it, well, what would you allow in that? I don't want to see such and such, or I don't want to see this thing. Well, what do you envision? What would fit? And part of that discussion also is a discussion on nonconformance. Well, if so many of the lots are nonconforming, then converting some of the parcels to R1 is not really such a big change. So it's melded together. Hope that's helpful. What does anybody hear anything about these where we are today or where we're headed discussions? I know Rich Epstein's here. I've received back and forth with some emails. We're going to try and connect over a cup of coffee next week. Are you hearing anything from the community about this? There's a lot of discussion about very important issues other than housing right now. But if you've heard anything, please pipe up.
I guess just one, it's sort of a couple of anecdotes that lead me to believe a thing that I think we should all be sort of prepared to maybe think about in advance or just be prepared to hear more in April, which is, I think, a prevailing perspective that that single family homes in the most traditional sense, one family in each house on a lot, is sort of the platonic ideal of what housing should look like, and that anything else that isn't that is somehow perceived to be worse or inferior or fully straight up bad. That's not my perspective at all. And maybe that's not your perspectives either, but I think that we should be prepared to hear that and maybe be prepared to speak to it in hopefully a positive and constructive way. I'm not sure exactly the right, words we should use or examples we should provide, or what that might look like. And maybe this isn't even the opportunity to do that yet. Maybe that's in the third meeting down the road. But I have heard it here and there, and it's primarily from folks who are maybe a little bit outside of my generation. I think folks who I talk to who are, parents of young kids like me. I think many of us have come here from other places. We've lived places where things are maybe a little bit more dense and there's a little bit more variety of housing, so that our frame of reference isn't quite as, I'll say, narrow. And so when I think about sort of visioning, I think we should be prepared, again, at the appropriate time to provide good examples of what, and I know we have them. They've been presented to us in the past at some of these other meetings, at least for us kind of internally. And I think that we would be well served to be able to have those types of things available, like I think of the big house, little house barn type of idea, and some of those types of things where they would absolutely, in my perspective, sort of fit New England architecture. They would fit with the town character, all of those sort of softer things that maybe aren't going to be as immediately obvious to people who are coming in with let's say, a narrower perspective on, a single family home on a cul-de-sac kind of an idea. I heard it from a neighbor of mine who's a very smart and considered guy, but as I sort of probed a little bit and I sort of mentioned a couple different ideas, he's a New Yorker, so he's not gonna agree to anything immediately, but you could sort of see him thinking a little bit about it. That's just sort of a general thought I had,
Yeah.
I think the more examples we can provide of different ideas that may not be as top of mind for folks, I think the better served will be.
So I'm gonna build on that. I agree with you. People feel, the feedback I'm getting is, the Hearing Housing Commission, is that we're trying to force extra houses to be built throughout town. And I think the point that Neil is making, some of our examples are right on Main Street. We have four houses right there. We have the old hospital building, which is 4 condos. It's at least 4. We have Dr. Clough's house, which is, granted, you guys don't know what these are, but they're all on Main Street. They've all been converted into multi-family homes. So the bigger houses, that is a benefit. And I don't know how you go about doing that in New London, New Hampshire. To be very honest, because these have been there for a while. But, and I think that they need to understand we're not trying to force anybody to build more houses or do more of anything. We're just trying to present to them, we need some more housing. How would you like to see it done? Main Street have all multifamily homes? No, not necessarily, but they don't want railroad train looking house with 4 units, et cetera, et cetera. They want something more attractive than that. And again, I agree, we need to be ready for some pushback because people really think this is what we're trying to do, is make pop-up houses all over town, like mushrooms.
Mike?
Yeah, I one of the things that I've struggled with, and
We're being recorded.
sorry,
Yep.
unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. One of the things I've struggled with over time and the data that's being developed has been, what is the real development opportunity that exists? There's been a lot of discussion about the size of lots and maybe reconfiguring a lot, turning something into a 4-unit, or somebody that might want to tear their house down and build multi. That isn't likely to happen. And so where I'm trying to get to is, out of the entire inventory, raw material inventory that exists in this town of New London, how much of it can be turned into something that either conforms or meets the criteria that we're describing in this case. So, how many 5-acre lots are there sitting around waiting to get built? How many acres untouched are sitting around waiting to have something happen to them that aren't already spoken for? And I suspect that what we're talking about as we go around is an overstatement of the potential for development, significant overstatement of the potential for development in terms of how much additional stuff can get built. So I'd really like to find a way to kind of parse through the data that we have and say, this lot over here is 10 acres, and oh, by the way, and I don't own this, Quinn owns it, and he's got a house on it. He's not going to put some other house on it because he doesn't want to, or because you have to take this down and do something else. How many 10-acre lots that are sitting around waiting for somebody to build something on? Again, I suspect that number is a much smaller universe than the universe we're talking about that could look different. And the could part is what may be scaring folks.
Well, that, I see it the same way, Mike, and you raised some good points. I think of that as being a build-out analysis. And we did at one point have RP&D with Zach's guidance look at the data, and I've forgotten what the number was. It's something in the 70th percentile, 70% of the land in New London could be developed. And we all gasped and said, well, that can't be right. That can't be right. And what it comes down to is the unique characteristics of each property.
Yes.
So physical, but also owner's motivation and what their personal needs are and what their financial capabilities are that meets that interest. So there's so many things that limit what the maximum build out could be, that it's, whenever I hear somebody did a build out, I say, well, that's not very productive information. So it would be nice, and we actually have a wonderful resource sitting next to me who knows almost every parcel in town, but I think to go through each and every parcel, there are over, what, 3,000 of them or so, would be impossible, but the concept is valid, is that there are all these natural limitations to development. But the non-conformance may help us from the negative side, as opposed to look at positive side and whittling it down to look at what the possibilities are, if that makes any sense.
You're live.
I know. Sorry not to speak before it was my turn. I'm just shifting back a little bit, and I agree, sort of mostly. But I assume we're gonna have some slides or something, and the slides, I think, I remember sometime long ago and far away, we saw some slides of some of these examples of potential housing, like the cottage places and some of that. And then sprinkle in with that the things that already exist. I think would be a good visual for people. I mean, there are a lot of real good examples already, and some of them been there longer than I am, you know? So I think I remember thinking how cute some of those things were, and how fun it would be to see come around the corner. And then we've got the new things behind the sport shop and, you know, all of that stuff. So I think let's help them vision rather than let them vision what they think how horrible it's gonna be.
Yeah, good point.
And another is I don't know what's in there now, where Ali's was, there's apartments above that, there's apartments above some of these commercial, which there could be more of. There used to be apartment above Tucker's, there was, you know, there's apartment potential that hasn't been acted on or reverted to for lots of reasons, but, and I don't even, again, I think that people don't, it's hard to understand how you go about making Maryland's house 4 apartments.
No, you don't, but I happen to also have 11 acres of land. And you could do something out behind my house, except for the current zoning. And people would never even know it was there, except the road coming out. As I tried to encourage for the Messer property, I wanted some houses down the woods.
And truly, your house is the classic example of the main house, middle house, back house barn, where you have the historic main structure, an L that was probably added 50 years later, and then a garage that was probably added after that, and then a colossal barn that probably the entire house in L could fit inside of, plus some other little outbuildings. I mean, that's the whole concept of that design scheme, is that some of these very large older homes could very discreetly house a couple of families.
As some as are, not so much ours is a good example of that, but ours is a good example of something that could end up with a number of things off the road, and no one would ever know they were there.
Mhm.
And, you know, 11 acres, I mean, the main part of our stuff, to have it look the way it does, is probably 4 acres, maybe maximum. So think about, I mean, I think about it a lot. I can't afford to do it, but I think about that, you know, it's there. Bumps up to the outing club, you know, it's awesome. But
So I like Marilyn's idea of taking somebody who can take slides and make them look as attractive as the ones that are gonna be presented by the professionals, and show that we've got some of these things, and this is where there's potential also.
Yeah, I'll quickly add, Amy had also sent, take some photographs of some existing buildings that had internal ADUs in them. Correct, Amy, of those photos that you sent me?
Is that what those, the ones on Barrett Road? The one on the corner?
They're duplexes.
They're duplexes,
Yeah,
but do
yeah.
you consider those internal ADUs?
No,
No.
They're not ADUs per se, but they're, yeah,
Mhm.
duplexes.
Then there's the one at the end of Barrett.
Mhm.
So on the left
Everett
side as you go.
Park?
Yeah.
Everett Park. Barrett Road becomes Everett Park
turns
after
into
Yes.
Everett
Parkside.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry, yes.
There's
It's newer, it's the one with the arc driveway?
It's next to, it's very close to Marriott's. It's got.
Yeah, where the sewer line goes through next.
Right,
Correct.
Then there's that chunk of land that area owns.
Yeah, the Apple Tree Lane sort of paper street. Yeah, and that, I mean, that neighborhood has a variety of examples. You know, Joe and Joy Cubitt's house was built as a duplex in the 40s on the Barrett Road end of it.
Right.
And then on the Everett Park end, there's a couple that are like condo style duplex where they share the land and they own their units individually. And then there's a couple that the lot line goes down the middle of the building, which is the one with the half moon driveway. And then there's one that there's the main house owner owns both their unit and the back duplex unit.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of styles and how that's played out over time, which is kind of interesting.
and there's apartments in, I don't know if they're declared or not, but. The very end, it's yellow.
The Griffin, yep, that does have a.
But the thing is that having this be part of the slideshow, or however we choose to depict what the options are, what it could be, is really key, because I don't know how many people know how many different options that currently exist on Barrett Road, never mind.
Just on
Yeah,
Barrett Road.
Just on Barrett Road, which is so close to Main Street.
Barrett Road's another one. Besides,
Yeah, I'm thinking of 2 or 3 others actually in that neighborhood off the top of my head, Wendy's and her mom's old house. I mean, all of those for decades.
And I would argue even like my road, Carter Road, was built in the 70s, I guess. And so my house is the only house on the road that conforms because the previous owners sold off a bunch of land in the back before I bought it. But they had to retain 2 unusable acres to attach via a old cow path easement to my property to make it conform. So I own like 4.01 acres in New London because my house is in the whatever the 4-acre ARR area.
so you would be absolutely the person that comes before the zoning board that says, I'd like to build another house on the other 2 acres. Connected by that.
And yeah, unfortunately, it is so unusable because you'd have to walk, unless you're a cow, you couldn't get back there. You know, through any practical way, but yes, I would ideally love to do that. But every other house on my road, they're all lovely homes, they're all smaller homes, and they would be impossible to build today. Because you'd need a much bigger parcel of land, and the land costs would be so high that in order to make it pencil out, you'd have to build something enormous. So it's again another example of, you know, if you allow for smaller lot sizes, you could theoretically end up with some more modest homes, even if your frame of reference is only a single family home will do. You know, I don't think that anybody would walk down my street and find it objectionable and out of character with New London.
And then I remember, how many people really know what's down where the Perry's apartments are, condos are? I bet so few people know, and I mean, they're attractive, you go inside, they're beautiful. I mean, they were beautifully Perry Snow finished. And how many people live there? A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
24 families. I mean, depends on how many in each unit.
Where's
but
the persons?
the Cottage Lane that
Oh,
we
Cottage Lane,
pushed.
yeah.
And there's more down there.
Yep, that's very good. You know, what might be helpful is to, I would ask, after the meeting sometime, send me an email, if you will, if the address of the properties that you're thinking of. Dig out if you can what the addresses are. And I'll take my digital camera and drive around and try and get some pictures that we can feed to Steve. I'll need your help, Adam, because you know the properties far better than I do. I might get the addresses wrong, and then we can perhaps create a list of them with some context on each one. And
Do you want me to retake?
Take it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do think if we're gonna, I mean, obviously from a public street, anything is public, but I think if we are gonna use people's houses as examples, we may want to reach out to the individuals. I mean, I think it could be alarming to show up to a meeting and here's a picture of your house on the screen as the example that, I don't know, maybe.
yeah, it's point well taken.
Do you want me
I
to
would-
retake? All right, so I guess I can't retake unless we ask.
I mean, I guess that's a decision for you guys to make, but it might be.
Yeah, it's
that-
well taken. I was thinking, it's public, if you're taking a picture from the street. It's just, it's the same kind of thing you can find in the assessment records, right?
I was
Mhm.
gonna say, can we use assessment pictures?
I'm sure they're public, however, I would say they're not all recent, so the quality is not fantastic to reproduce in other media. Um,
Well, let's build a list first, shall we? If you have some in mind, build a list, shoot me an email and we'll,
I mean, and I think at least for a handful of them, we have relationships with the owners that we could get that permission. I think it's just a matter of the ask,
You don't need every one of them.
right?
20 of them.
we will ask the owners. That's a very good point.
Will the cow path in there?
I just want to say it's not just an easement, it's actual land. The planning board made sure that the former owners actually owned the land when they allowed the subdivision.
Terrific. Any other thoughts about this matter? Like to move on. So in my email to you, I think I outlined the fact that it appears to many folks, including me, that we don't have an awful lot of time to put together an event, so to speak. We talked about communities and consequences video and some storytelling that might go with that. As I was discussing it with different people and looking at the timing, we have 28 days from today till town meeting. 6 more days after that to our next scheduled meeting, which is the 17th of March. When we'll be doing planning for the April 5th forum. And then 19 days later, the forum occurs itself. So it seems as if we have a lot of work to do during that period. Now, that being said, Adam and I meet on a regular basis on different things, all housing related, of course. And Adam had an idea, an observation that I thought made a terrific amount of sense. So I'll put words in his mouth and then he can tell me I didn't quite get it right. But the notion was based on a schools teachers principle, which is when kids come back from summer, they've lost 70% of what they learned in the prior year. I'm sure I was one of those students. So when you think of all the facts that we put out there back in November to our good community, how many of those facts do we really need to make sure are brought forward? And that made a lot of sense to me. So then we were reflecting on ways that this could be done. Adam had heard of and knows personally a young graphic art and marketing person in town by the name of Kelsey Clark, who works at one of the real estate firms. And we met with Kelsey to see what she might be able to do. Now, keep in mind, this would all be with our municipal allocation of funds, not the HOP grant. Because the HOP grant is out there and it's allocated and it's budgeted very carefully and tightly, by the way. And so we met with Kelsey and came up with some ideas, many of which are technologically related, and I am least qualified for that. So I warned Adam in advance that I would ask him to do a quick review of our meeting with Kelsey.
So the discussion with Kelsey was sort of centered around what is the information that we want to make sure the folks who have been engaged so far and maybe need to start to get engaged because they want to come to the next event, but what is it that they need to know? What is that sort of one pager that we want to make sure we're reminding them, make sure that they understood it correctly, that these are the sort of the facts. How do we want to remind them about the upcoming event? And then perhaps something that goes along with the mapping tool that will continue to be used and become an important part of this project as we go. And then sort of once we've figured out what that messaging is, how do we want to actually disseminate that to the general public? So we met with Kelsey and she had a few different ideas. We had initially asked her to talk about ad in the shopper, and the shopper is quite expensive for a page ad, like close to $1,300 for a 1 week color ad for one page. And so it's not that much cheaper for black and white, it's a couple $100 cheaper, but the discussion became is that, you know, the 22,000 people that read the shopper every week, only a couple thousand of them actually live in New London, so you're paying a significant amount because it has a wide readership. However, the vast majority of those people we don't necessarily need to be targeting with our message. And then you also get into the demographic that reads the shopper versus, you know, the demographic that maybe we are not hitting and getting information out to. So would we really just be hitting the same demographic that's reading municipal matters, that's watching selectmen's meeting minutes and those sorts of things? And so Kelsey had a few other ideas that were very interesting. One that I think we were really intrigued by, although functionally it doesn't seem like it's going to really work, is the use of social media advertising, where you can, for very little money, like less than $20, you can hit hundreds, if not thousands, of Instagram and Facebook pages to people who are in this zip code, and then the Elkin zip code you can control to that. Unfortunately, to do that, you have to have a business social media presence. In order to buy those advertisements, there has to be a business page that your advertisement is pulling back to. It can be just a Facebook page, even Instagram can pull back to Facebook through the fact that they're all Meta. However, the town, we don't have social media, and it's a much more complex beast for government to have social media versus individuals from retaining records and correspondence. And at this point, it's just not something that we can really wade into on heavier subjects that may get into dialogues and back and forth. And so we sort of boiled down to this option of an email purchase, where every time you sign up to pay a bill online or to get more information from a contractor or a vendor, and you're clicking the little I accept conditions under, it's probably fine print saying that you are willing for your email address to be sold by these marketing companies. And so for just over $200, we can purchase about 900 email addresses in New London. And so along with the municipal matters mailing list, the selectmen's email list, the emails that we collected at the last meeting, and these 900 email addresses, which some of them will be overlapping, we can put them all in an Excel database and pull out the overlapping ones and have a direct marketing message that goes out, where Kelsey could still put together the sort of one pager that has those details that we're looking to share, that gets pushed directly to their inboxes, and then at the same time utilize the shopper through a much smaller ad where there's a QR code, that by clicking that QR code that's on I forget what size of the page, but a third or a quarter, or, you know, a couple $100 size ad could take you to that same information and that graphic housed on our website. So that we could hit people directly through email and then also indirectly through the shopper at a much more affordable rate, by utilizing our website to really be the advertisement and house the information. So that's where things sort of stood as of our conversations.
I would add, there's also, Kelsey knows the mechanism, like several resources for direct mail. And that can be done based on addresses that are acquired from the US Post Office, so direct to zip codes in New London and Elkins, of course, the two zip codes. And that cost, I think, is about $1,700 for a simple two-sided color brochure that Kelsey would put together artwork. So I will report that at this time, we have about $1,200 in our municipal budget to work with. So we can work with that. We also need to be mindful of notices or alerts that we want to put out about the April 5th event, because we'll be doing some of that. And thinking back to what happened for marketing for the first forum, you may remember the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission paid for the mailing of that color piece that we sent out. So that if we were to do that again, that would not be in the budget for the hot print. So we need to do that on our own if we're gonna do that again, but it is a possibility, and so I'll stop there. Any thoughts?
That all sounds good. You know, I mean. Kelsey's got great ideas, and I think we need to go forward with that whole process and see where else we can come up with some more emails if she falls short of the 900.
So she knows that that's what's available. She has access to those systems through subscriptions. So though she doesn't get the emails until you actually purchase them, she knows that it's 843. And then plus we can download the other distribution lists that we have. I think the question is, how do we hit people that are maybe missing from the conversation so far? You know, I'm guessing a lot of these emails that are purchased are that sort of 50 and under crowd that is probably the ones putting their emails in that are getting sold on a regular basis. So hopefully there's not as much overlap between that purchase list and say the folks that are subscribing to Municipal Matters, so that, you know, when those two get put together, it's not just that we're, you know, taking out 200 emails of overlap, that the list actually grows there.
Let me add one other quick thought. If you have received email, of course, most people do, and you have not given that email address to either our first forum registration or Municipal Matters or places where you expected to be in communication, and you all of a sudden you get an email from the Housing Commission, it might tend to turn a little bit negative towards the concept of whatever the material is. So I just mentioned that because we have to be careful about buying email lists. I think I'm in favor of it, but there could be some pushback on it.
I never read it. I mean, if it comes from somebody I don't know, it comes from somebody I don't know, it just gets spam. Just finds its way off my page.
I do think they have the ability to, in the subject line and the sender, to really make it understood that it's from the town, so that it seemed, I mean, it is official, but so that it has an official look to it, not like you know, some of the spam emails that we get.
It's also, we also have an unsubscribe component on the very bottom. So somebody's really not happy with us and they don't ever want to hear from us again, they can do that.
And once we have the emails, we own them. And so, you know, you can continue to use these lists in the future.
How can we get in an opinion letter that can go in the Intertown Record for free prior to the April meeting? There's some sort of article that can go, and you don't have to pay for.
Can you do that?
I don't know how. I'm not very good at getting stuff for free.
I've often thought, of course, I wouldn't do it as a housing commission member without your support, but I've often thought, you know, a letter from me in the Intertown Record could be done properly. Sort of an update. Here's what we've been doing. Please come. We're headed towards April 5th. Here's why. Here are the steps.
Does that cost money?
Opinion letters do not.
Opinion letter?
No, and KNP, for example, has become quite active almost every issue. They have an article which is in the Intertown Records or describing what they're doing and initiatives. So I think the Intertown Record generally is supportive of town initiatives and people who care about different things that are important. So it could be done.
I definitely think we need to get something in it. If, you know, whatever the published date is, not the week of the meeting, but the week before that.
Not the week of town meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not on Wednesday. Or no, not the week of the April
No, yeah,
5th meeting.
last week of March.
Thank you.
And
And
that's,
it'd be after town meeting.
is the Intertown Record like, is it a newspaper? Where does one,
It's a mini.
and where does one come across it?
The tobacco shop.
Tell me more.
It's an old,
Colonial.
At the pharmacy?
No, they don't, they don't.
They don't distribute anymore. You have to, it's electronic.
Buy it and
No, but if you go online,
subscribe,
you can
Oh,
subscribe.
it's online, like a newsletter.
37.
It was an actual weekly newspaper until about a year ago,
Hmm.
and now they are solely online.
No,
Well, no.
Or you can get it in the mail, rather. You can get it in the mail through your subscription, but you can't, it's not a newspaper of general circulation where you can actually go to the newsstand and purchase.
Yeah, it
You
used
can
to
go to the
be,
library,
yeah, you could probably go see it in the library, right?
I'm sure they have.
Yeah, I mean, we have copies at the town office, but
And there are at the town office, or if I have some past ones, I'll just leave my rooms.
51 Carter.
I think that that is in a lot of ways a telling example of how we may not be hitting a demographic by utilizing that.
I'm worried about that a little bit. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure which demographic it is. This thing, I mean, that,
I
I
think
mean,
it's,
I would say like,
both sides of it, I guess.
It's Neil's demographic that we're missing.
well,
No, not.
judging by the demographic data that we've seen, I don't necessarily represent a huge chunk of the town, but I would also
Oh, I
argue
would
that like,
Go
That-
beyond that.
sure, absolutely. I seem to recall also from, as I recall, from like the sort of summary of people who attended the last meeting, I believe only one person identified as a renter. And that speaks volumes, and I would love to see that number go up. So that people feel like they have a voice, even if they are not a white male property owner.
They're voters, so many. of them are
Absolutely.
voters.
Yeah, this is pretty good.
are there any ideas as to how we can reach those we don't think we're reaching? We know, we feel that the social media approach is a slippery slope. We can't really go there. Given the fact that we don't have the infrastructure for town Facebook as Adam had described, but are there other ways that we can reach other demographics that aren't reading the Intertown Record or the Kearsarge shopper?
Can we leverage relationships with like the PTO?
Chamber.
Like, I don't know the degree to it, like I happen to be good friends with the woman who's the president of the PTO. I don't know the degree to which she can use her distribution lists for things that are not specific to the goings on at the school per se. I would argue this is a topic and an issue that is directly relevant to our ability to hire and attract teachers to our community, and as much as we continue to have schools. But you know, I would certainly be happy to have that conversation with her if we're sort of allowed to do that.
It doesn't hurt to ask, see where the overlap could be, because that would be very helpful.
So.
There may be an intersection with churches.
Ah,
I know that you've asked, to do something at town meeting, the actual meeting, not the voting. And there's two different groups that come to the meeting versus the voting. And I really do think you want to get at the voting one, because that tends to bring the younger people, because that's really the meat of the town.
The Australian ballot thing.
So,
you mean election day, Tuesday, the 11th,
no, I mean, the next night.
oh, the next night,
6
okay.
o'clock. It brings a much younger group in.
Yeah, she's right.
We don't.
You think it's, I'm sorry, Ann, you think it's younger that comes to town meeting or comes to vote?
No meeting.
Interesting.
There seems to be
Think
more
of all the people that are sitting up on bleachers.
bleachers. She's right.
Anyway. I think that that's not gonna be disallowed. It was discussed at our very small election meeting last night, or whatever. But it can't be flow can't be interrupted getting the people from parking lot, everybody's gonna have to come in through here, everybody. There is no exception. And, this, if you haven't been in school from the other end, it's all blocked off, except for a very small channel that goes by the office. It's literally a plexiglass wall, I guess is what it is. If you haven't been down to the other end, have you been down there? Haven't been looking strange, definitely look in the door down there, you'll see. There's only 2 doors to the left-hand side that are used to go in, and they're controlling the traffic coming in. And I just wanted to go through to look at something else down there, and you have to have a pass to get through those doors. So they've got that whole area locked down. So saying, this is where people are gonna pick up their registration to their tickets to go in and vote, their card to hold up to be counted, and their tickets to, because we have at least 1 bond issue. And can't set up here, but possibly you can set up before you get in here or after you leave, but you can't block the traffic. So I think it is a good place to come and be prepared with some pictures of something to make them think about housing. I don't know what that is, because again, we were just discussing this briefly. But I think we need to be present someplace at election to remind people there's a meeting coming up and that we'd like to see them there.
Haven't people handed things out on the way in to check in?
I'm not sure they're gonna be allowed to do that.
This is the gym we're talking.
Yes, and they're gonna control that the gym can only have people with cards that have registered to vote. They can't bring their whole family and their neighbors and their babysitters and et cetera, et cetera.
I did reach out to Michael Todd about 3 weeks ago and introduced this idea to him. He's of course the moderator. And he said he was having several meetings with other moderators. Of course, personally, he was generally supportive of some of our housing work. And he would discuss it and get back to me. I've not heard back from him. But I think the meeting was going to be after this meeting, so I'm going to give him a few days and I'll follow up. Because I'm sure he would have a handle on it now. So I made a note to myself to call Michael.
I think one thing that, and I know we're kind of getting close to 4 o'clock, but that would be helpful. It sounds like everyone is on board with at least getting the sort of piece put together, and then we can figure out distribution. And I think as far as, you know, PTO or the different faith groups or any other organizations you're in, once we have the piece developed, you know, certainly everyone can share that to all of the groups that you are involved in, links to the town website, and then that, you know, it's public document, so that can get sort of organically distributed throughout everyone's different networks. And I think that that's a really, you know, important way. I think Randy was responsible for quite a few of the attendees at the last through the churches, and I think that that proved to be a good organic way of getting information out. What I think would be helpful to get Kelsey started is what are some of the basic points that you want to make sure are conveyed in a piece like this?
I'll jump in quickly, Adam. I didn't get a chance to report to you. I spoke with Steve Whitman this morning. I asked him, are there any components of what we're thinking about doing that would fit in his budget to support? And I asked him specifically, would he help us with the messaging for what we're putting together here? And he said he would.
Great.
Put together the salient facts that came out of the first forum that they felt really should be carried forward, should be reminded and brought forward to the next event. So we'll get a first cut from him, and then we can add whatever we want.
Good.
Or subtract.
I don't think, I just sort of back up a little bit, we were talking about we were gonna have people talking, and we're gonna have situational things and people, so people could understand the need. I think that was the purpose of the first meeting, in a sense, that we don't need to bring it again. What we need now is what can we do? What are our options? So I don't think it's bad that we're having to sort of back off of that part of it. I don't think that, I think it makes sense that the next step is now visioning what can fulfill the need. We know you know, I mean, lots of people recognize the fact that we don't have this or we don't have that, but I don't know, that was back in.
Yep, I hear you. The notion here is thinking back to the first stage being sort of the fact finding is dealing with the demographics and land use facts that we were able to pull out from existing conditions. And now we want to bring forward, it was that whole presentation we had in the forum that had lots of details. It's impossible, at least for my pea brain, to recall a significant portion of those. We can't recite all of those. We don't want to bring forward all of those, but there's some that are very, very important that that relate to the facts that we have to deal with. So that's the idea. Adam at one point, I think, said, be careful, don't make it too boring. Because if you hand out a data sheet, you're gonna put people to sleep.
It's gonna be,
So it's
that whole data thing nipped. Really nipped, because we all saw last time what people got stuck on with an exact number of like a percentage. That then they just started walking around town.
Yeah.
That's all they wanted to talk about.
well, we'll work on those, all those facts, and as soon as we get them, we'll shoot them out to you. It may be that we need to have another meeting, prior to our next one scheduled on March 17th. It starts to get in the way of town meeting, of course, but we're just discussing this piece that we're putting out, so, we might do that. Any other thoughts?
Is there any way we could do that on a Zoom?
Could?
A
On the
forum has to be in person.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that expired after the COVID
Oh, shoot.
declarations.
Okay, didn't know that. Okay, so we have to have a quorum in person, but we can manage that. Terrific. Any other thoughts, comments? Why don't we call for a vote? I don't do that enough of the time. Call for a vote as to putting out this piece and getting to work on it in advance, seeing what the distribution can be and how much we can reach sections of our community that we haven't been able to reach before.
I second that.
So,
All in favor, say
all
aye.
right.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstained? Terrific. New business. Save the date notice.
Did you?
I'll get to
Okay.
that, yeah. Save the date notice. We have two drafts that were given to us by,
I like the top ones.
top one is which one, with the picture or without? Without the picture. Here, I'll hand out.
Oh, I need.
Paper.
Yeah.
So just looking at those two options. The first one doesn't have the picture of the first meeting as a background. But the content is the same. What do you envision? Come help us plan the future of housing in New London. Again,
Oh, I see.
you see, the second one has a picture behind it, so that. But the graphics is done in a way that makes it pop a little bit.
Is this just in PowerPoint?
I'm sorry,
Is this just in PowerPoint? Or like,
we can produce it in a lot of different ways. We could put it on a, if we want to, on a postcard or.
no, I was just, I spent a lot of time in PowerPoint. I could think of like 5 different ways to make this better. Could I take a stab at it
Yes, please.
tonight?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, so
Did I-
you want the original?
If that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
What's in
Because I think you could just dim the image a little bit and the text would pop. I would also make April 5th, save the date, April 5th, or
Larger.
so it's just stop the first thing you see.
Yeah.
But in any case,
Terrific. I will ask Steve Whitman.
This could be a lot smaller.
That initiative thing.
Basically.
yeah, that's basically a disclaimer on this.
I'll have Steve Whitman, probably Liz Kelly, send you the PowerPoint or whatever format it's in.
Yeah.
It's in some sort of Microsoft Word, I think. but-
Okay, either way, yeah.
And then, what was your comment, Mike?
This, the acknowledgement thing over here in the lower end, the blue, seems to me could be much smaller. Basically, you're saying, who the grip is and who the associate director is.
Yeah, that whole blue box,
It has to be there,
the
but
whole blue box has to be there, but
But it
it
can be
doesn't need
tiny.
to take up that much space.
it can be time.
Could be running along the bottom.
Are you with that, Neil?
Just make sure you
Okay.
can see the
you'll-
Q code.
You'll carry that comment?
Sure.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
good.
I mean, you don't have to do, you don't have to accept anything that I do, and, you know.
No, but I mean,
Well,
I'm
you get what
gonna
you
be
pay for.
passing that off to you. And you'll have that
Yeah.
conversation between the two of you, you and
Sure.
Liz, or you and Steve, and then you'll get back to us with
Absolutely,
what you found together. That'd be great.
sure.
Now, the question is what we're gonna do with this. We certainly should send it out through municipal matters and, okay, we're almost wrapped up.
Are we allowed to like print these out and ask Teddy at Grounds and other folks to just put them up around town?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
We use the same system we did before. Okay. I purchased several more copies of the missing middle book, which I went through, and in the middle of it, is a really great section on different types of housing.
Yeah,
And so, Adam has 2 more copies at town hall for to use. I have one here. Somebody else is able to borrow if they like. The middle section, well, it's a good book, but also that middle section is for us. Would you like it? No? No?
I don't want to.
no, I've had it.
Okay.
I remember looking at it though. I did look.
Well, it's valuable flipping through. Okay. Keep it moving. Public comment. Do we have any public comment? No, thank you. Anybody else? No, thank you. Current housing update.
Nothing new.
Housing Appeals Board case still continues with Long Meadow Commons. I did see New London Springfield Water Precinct has a budget meeting coming up soon. And that's all I know. Any update? Future meetings, town meeting is March 11th and 12th. Our next meeting is Monday, March 17th here. We will have RP&D here planning for the #2 forum. And then, of course, Saturday, April 5th is the public forum itself at Wheeler Hall. Anything else? I forget anything? Great. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
It says here.